Here I am. Here I am. Here we are. I got my mic turned on, guys. How about that? That's a success for today. I've got Luke Tscharke here with me. We've had fun and games. I've already had fun and games. I had broken links on my website. I had failed payments happening left, right, and centre. I had all sorts going on. I replied to a spam email, which I shouldn't have done, which freaked me out. Had to change all my passwords. And then I got Luke on, and his audio wouldn't work. But we've managed to get here, and I think it's going to work, and we managed to get it all going. Luke's just over here. Before I introduce him, Luke Tscharke, one of my favourite photographers, great mate of mine. I've known him for probably nearly 10 years, maybe, I suppose. Let me reel off some of these awards. He's got plenty of awards, like unbelievably, a couple of pages worth of awards. I'm just going to give you the highlights, but there's heaps of those as well. 2014 Focus Awards Black and White winner. 2014 Focus Awards Cityscape winner. 2015 Focus Awards, first place in Landscape and Creative. 2015 Focus Photographer of the Year. 2015 Better Photography Awards Classic Landscapes Golden Overall winner. Unbelievable. I don't want to miss any. International Photographer of the Year, winner of the Landscape category. Monochrome Awards Landscape Professional, first place. Monochrome Awards, Monochrome Photographer of the Year, 2015, both of those. 2015 International Landscape Photographer of the Year, winner of Photograph of the Year. 2016 Tasmanian Nature and Landscape Photography Award, winner of Wild Landscapes. 2016, oh my gosh, Luke, so many. 2016 Magazine Top Emerging Photographer. 2016 Institute of Photography AIPP Emerging Photographer of the Year. 2017 Insight Astronomy Photographer of the Year, first place Nightscapes. David Malin Astrophotography Awards winner Nightscapes. David Malin Astrophotography Awards overall winner in 2018. That's some sort of list. Luke, let's bring him on. Good mate of mine, Luke Tscharke. I'll just turn your mic on. Welcome, Luke. How you doing?
Thanks very much for having me, Adam. It's absolutely a privilege to be here with you. And yeah, it's I've been following your show for ages, and so it's pretty awesome to actually be on here now. So yeah, and how have you been?
I'm good, mate. I'm good, and I can hear you, and you can hear me, and everyone at home can hear us too, hopefully. So that's an absolute win this morning, mate. It was
unbelievable. I was just telling Adam, he's had a lot of computer problems, and so have I, and so I've had to change up a whole bunch of things last minute, but I think I've been able to put everything together that I would have liked to have. So that's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, mate. And for everyone at home, as we run through a very impressive list, absolutely. Young, how you doing, Young? Great to have you here again this morning. For everyone at home, I should be looking up here, shouldn't I? I'm looking at the wrong camera. For everyone at home, be sure to add some questions as you go through, and I'll pass them on to Luke as we look over his incredible photos. I think everything's clear. So, Luke, when you like, jump on and we'll start sharing those photos and we'll just have a chat as we go through.
I'll just share away now. Certainly let me know if you can't see it. Just press share now. Has that come through at all?
That has. We've still got that weird grey bar, which has crept down a little further. Just, oh no, that's gone. It's gone. I don't know what that was.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to know. So I'm just going to open up the first image. Hopefully that bar's not too far in the way.
No, yeah, it's perfect.
All right. So now I guess you rattled off a lot of awards, and there wasn't too many recent ones, and I've actually tried to, not consciously, but I've stopped entering awards, or I've really only focused on certain competitions that I really enjoy entering, I suppose, or are much more aligned with the pictures that I take, which is why there's a few more astrophotography type awards in there. But this particular image I call Barossa Bolt, and so this is actually probably the image that resulted in a lot of, probably maybe 50 to 60% of those awards that Adam just listed. And it's a photograph of it's actually infrared photograph, and it's of a tree in a field, obviously in the Barossa Valley, in a thunderstorm. And I'm very, you can see behind, there's actually quite a lot of rain there, and only minutes or probably seconds after I took this shot, I got pelted with hail. But the thing I love about this image is that it kind of really follows the rule of thirds. You've got the bottom third line is the horizon, the top third line is this the big cloud that you've got here, and then you've got the lightning bolt, and then this cloud here is sort of a little bit of an anchor as well, and then you've got a really strong central element as well. So I think the reason it must have worked so well in competitions is it's just very well balanced, and so it was one of those sort of images that you put it into competition and it just did really well every time.
Yeah,
so
it's a
so that's
spectacular
definitely
image.
one of my favorite images, and one of those. I think it's probably about the best shot I've ever taken of a thunderstorm, and probably will be. I'm not very good at shooting lightning or thunder or anything like that. Well, obviously you can't shoot thunder, but and those sort of things. But I'll continue on a bit with the monochrome theme. Actually,
Just on this,
monochrome's something that I used to shoot a lot more, and as I have transitioned more to doing commercial work and tourism type work, unfortunately, monochrome isn't something that's really desired by clients. Obviously, the photographers absolutely love black and white, but there are people out there that aren't really into it, and it doesn't really help to sell a location where everyone wants the beautiful, pretty pictures.
Yeah, sure.
So I haven't shot as much of it lately as I would have liked. But I do have some older shots that I've got from back in the day, but also I am working on more black and white, so it is something that I want to get back into because it is a lot of fun.
Just before you,
so this one's called Dunescape, and
just before you move on from that one, Luke,
dunes around Cervantes in Western Australia, and I've always really loved this shot, mainly for the little wisp of sand that's just coming off of the top of frame, and just how it all lines up and everything like that. So that's just sort of an example of some of the black and whites, and shooting dunes has got to be one of the most fun subjects to shoot as well. It's absolutely awesome to try and get the different lines and different lighting conditions, and in this case with the wisp of sand coming off the top. So I really love that.
It's a beautiful shot.
Was that something there, Adam?
Yeah, can you can still hear me there, Luke?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Absolutely spectacular, mate. Couple of quick questions I just had here. Graham asked which competitions in particular are your favourite. We'll just touch on that, seeing we just went through those awards.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, my favourite competition is the Australian Geographic Nature Photographer of the Year. Unfortunately, I didn't make it in this year, which was a bit of a bummer. And that I think that speaks a lot to the quality of the competition. Not to put myself on a pedestal, but the quality of the imagery in there is astounding, and it's a very carefully judged competition where they actually request a raw file for every single entry, just to verify that its authenticity. So it is much more of that kind of competition where they're looking for what was captured in the natural world, and no sort of wizardry added on top, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but in this case we want to celebrate what's actually out there in nature, and so that's why they have those sort of rules.
Sure.
And then I also really love the David Malin Award, which is the largest astrophotography competition in Australia. I was lucky enough to win that overall in 2018. And as part of that, you actually go to Parks, which is where the dish is. You might remember that film. And you can actually, they put an exhibition of all of the finalists actually in the dish. And so anyone that's visiting the dish can then actually go and see all of those prints. And so that's pretty exciting as well. So they're really great competitions to be part of. And what I do love about both those competitions is that they have an exhibition as part of it. So you're not only do you become a finalist and you win a prize, perhaps, but you also have your work exhibited as well, which isn't always the case with a lot of the online competitions. So so that's definitely a couple of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let you get back to it. I love this image. I remember the first time I ever saw it. It's just so dramatic and spectacular.
Yeah, it really is, and it just speaks to like it was a total grey out basically. Within about 30 minutes of capturing this, and then the cloud descends and things start to peel apart, and then the light can come in, and so you get those really beautiful dramatic conditions. And I actually chose to shoot this scene in infrared. because infrared has a great it has a property where it can actually photograph through bushfire smoke. And it actually, on this morning, it was actually not only very cloudy, but it was also very smoky. And so you don't actually see that in the picture, which is really cool. And the other feature I really love is that the pandani, which is this sort of spiky plant in the foreground, that comes up really white, and that's actually very green. But another property of infrared is that any foliage and leaves really comes up brilliantly white in the right sort of conditions, and so that really adds a very strong anchor in the foreground of the shot as well. So yeah, quite interesting conditions. And what I've actually done is I've actually included a kind of a before image. Well, actually, no, what I did, it's not a before image, actually. It's I also raced and got my color camera, and I thought it'd actually be a really cool opportunity to show the difference in the scene with color. So the next shot's actually the color version. So you can kind of see, looks a lot more drab and uninteresting in that sort of sense, and how much the angles changed slightly, but, and the clouds obviously changed because it was a different frame.
So much more dramatic.
You can sort of see that there's been quite a bit of you only need a very small amount of light to accent some of these clouds, and the tonal contrast is so much more amplified in the infrared, which is really interesting.
And where is this location, Luke?
Sorry, Adam.
Where is this place? Where are we looking at?
This place is in the Cradle Mountain Lake St Clair National Park. It's a area that's known as the Labyrinth, which is a very, very well respected photography location in Tasmania, and very difficult to get to. It involves quite a bit of walking, and it's I guess you'd class it as kind of a backcountry kind of walk. So you do need to have very good outdoor skills and things like that. So not a place I'd recommend to look up to go if you're just traveling in Tassie and by car and doing that sort of thing. It's very much a place for a dedicated trip, but it is probably one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world.
Sure.
And you can see the beautiful mountain peak in the background, Mount Jerry, and it has the big 3 notches in it. It's a very astounding looking mountain in person and also in pictures. So it's why I love going back there. And so I decided to also do a portrait composition from this morning as well. And this time with the color version, I took another color version. I didn't move the camera at all, so you can actually see the very subtle difference. But you can really see in this one the bushfire smoke that was coming through, and how hazy it is behind the actual mountains. But then if I flick back to the infrared, that you're almost seeing straight through that haze, and it's really quite clear. So it's quite fascinating actually how that works. So certainly the shot probably wouldn't have been one that I would have used if it was actually in color, just because of that haziness. But once you put the infrared on, it can have that impact. Again, I don't shoot much infrared anymore. Infrared's is sort of baking in it being black and white. It's a dedicated black and white camera essentially, and if I wanted to use it for a tourism purpose down the track or anything like that, it's a bit of a double-edged sword there. So I actually try to do more monochrome conversions on color now, but I still have the infrared camera, and I do intend to keep using it, but it doesn't make it out as much as it used to, unfortunately.
Quick question, Luke, on your portrait photography. I know you do a lot of magazine work and a lot of tourism work. Does that mean that you sort of, as part of your capture process, that you now capture a lot of your images both in landscape and portrait, just so that you have options when it comes to publications?
Absolutely. It's a very wise idea if you're ever out and about and you're looking to get into the commercial space or work with magazines. It's always a very good idea to have a portrait version of your image as well as a landscape version. And quite often they'll use the portrait mainly for magazine covers and that sort of thing. And it's nothing worse than you having the image that they want in landscape, and then they're like, "Oh, do you have that in portrait?" And you're like, Sorry, but another good thing is that because I shoot with quite a high resolution camera, I can crop portrait if I need to, but obviously
Yeah.
you do lose the sides.
Sure.
And the other thing I do love about shooting in portrait is just that you can really fill the foreground, and really helps to lead the eye into the scene. So I do
Yeah.
really enjoy. Actually, most of these images are landscape that I'm showing today, and that's mainly just because it works much better
Yes.
in Zoom or in the online realm where you've got a widescreen TV view. But yeah, definitely very good idea, Adam. Yeah.
Yeah. Quick.
And it's not hard to do, especially if you've got an L bracket. You just pop it in landscape, then unclip it, flip it around, put it in portrait. Very easy to do. So well worth it.
Quick audience question: what nanometer? I got no idea what nanometer value is, Luke. But what?
It's I was shooting with a 720 nanometer conversion. I recently changed it out to an 850 nanometer because I wanted to have more of a deep black and white. And I actually kind of regret that, to be honest, for a couple of reasons. Mainly, when you go to a more denser filter like 850 nanometers, it actually lets a lot less light in. So you actually have to push your ISO up a little bit higher to handhold those sort of images.
Gotcha.
And also, I can always add more contrast and post later. So I don't necessarily feel like there's a huge benefit that I may have thought I was getting. So it's sort of like one of the things that I did that I regret. But it was like if I didn't do it, I'd regret not trying it as well. So
sure.
you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't sometimes.
Exactly.
So I hope that answers that question. So the next one, this is one of my favorite images. Probably I would say it is my favorite image that I've taken. And I do use it a lot in some of my promos and avatars and things like that. And the reason for it is that this is actually a shot that I took when I first fell in love with wilderness photography, and really wanted to, and probably Tasmania to a degree as well. And so for me, it sort of symbolises my my finding of that sort of type of photography, or really just pushing myself to get out there. And it's at Barn Bluff, which is in Cradle Mountain Lake, Sinclair National Park as well. It's a hell of a national park in Tasmania. And it's actually one of the tallest mountains in Tasmania. It doesn't really look like it, but it's actually even taller than Cradle Mountain. And so this is the track that leads off to the Barn Bluff summit. What I do love about it is I didn't have to, you don't have to go off track to get these amazing photographs. It can actually be part of the photograph. And then we had the most amazing sunset where we had this cloud that was over the top of the peak, and it just lit up in this orange color, almost like a UFO was landing on the top of the mountain. And very calm, beautiful evening. Was there just with my really good friend and no one else. And I was on my own at this point because we'd parted ways shooting different locations. And so having that experience, just being there on my own and having just that connection with nature and being in this wide open space and so wild and being kilometers from the nearest civilization, it just sort of made me feel so joyful to be alive and to be able to capture these sort of moments. And so that's and it's, the good thing is too, it was on the overland track, and that's a 7-day walk, and I'd already taken this on basically the first day. So I was like, oh well, that's pretty cool. I've already got the shot before I've done the majority of the work. So that was pretty cool as well.
Takes the pressure off, doesn't it, mate? It's like
that particular image and why it's special to me. Yeah.
Takes the pressure off when you get one of those early ones, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure does. It sure does. Although, I try not to. I always, when I'm out in the bush, on like a walk like that, I always try and have the mentality that it's just a joy to be out here, and if I get a good photo, it's just a bonus. And it really does feel like that. You have so much fun that if you came back and you didn't really get that many great photos, it's not a huge big deal because you've just had an amazing time. And so that's another thing I really love about it. So there's not actually as much pressure as you may think. It's just you can only do what you can do in landscapes. If there's if the conditions aren't good, they aren't good. But that's my sort of approach to that.
Yeah, good attitude.
This one is a shot I took at. This is at what is it, Mount Wellington. It's the organ pipes, they call it. It's a big, huge dolerite spires, and we've got a Tasmanian native waratah flower that's sort of coated in this in dew, which really helps to make the shot. Now, it's not a very technically perfect shot at all, if you look at the back of this, it's quite soft because it's a bit out of focus. But the reason it's not focus stacked or anything like that is I was probably about maybe 3 or 4 centimeters actually away from this flower. It looks further away, and it's because I was shooting with a 10mm lens. And I was shooting so wide because if I was that close to the flower, but then still wanted to get the organ pipes in the background, I needed to be super wide. So it's one of those ones where I sort of feel like that, especially on social media, when you're looking at a smaller resolution, I probably wouldn't print this one necessarily, but you can really help to get that sort of feel with these sort of shots. And plus the fogginess in the background kind of helps to mask the softness of the image too. It sort of lends itself to that.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters, Luke. I think in actual fact, in some circumstances, I think it can really add to the subject and really draw you into that flower. And I think sometimes us landscape photographers get a little bit too tied up in front to back detail, and you can, really mess around with these sort of, lesser focal range shots, I suppose. Or, yeah, I like it. I think it's nice, really nice with that blurry background.
No, thanks, mate. Yeah, no, it's definitely it was one of those ones that was just heaps of fun, like getting close, trying to get the angles right, and very tedious as well. But it's great when you get the result you're after. This one is an Aurora shot. I've got a few Aurora shots, and that's one reason I moved to Tasmania, because the Aurora Australis down here, it's actually become a bit less frequent because of the they have a solar cycle, and at the moment we're in a very sort of what they'd call a solar minimum, which is basically that we're not actually getting that much auroral activity, unfortunately. But it's still very exciting when you can jump in the car and drive half an hour and capture a shot like this. It's probably even less than half an hour from my place. And so, you've got beautiful branch coming down. You've got, I think you can see the mouse. You've got the large Magellanic Cloud and the small Magellanic Cloud, which are sort of framed between these branches. And then, just beautiful scene, really. Nothing too special, but it's just very pleasing when you get these kind of moments. And then another one that I really love, this one is of the Aurora Australis, and you've also got the Milky Way as well. And around April, you can actually get this to happen, where you're getting the Milky Way rising as well as the Aurora happening, if you're lucky, at the same time. And then here I've chosen to kind of split that in the middle with the tree, which I lit with a little light. And then you've got some sort of diagonals and different lines going on. I like to put the horizon sort of pretty close to the third line with these sort of shots and give a bit of space to the foreground. And then, you've got the large and small Magellanic Cloud there too, and some beautiful auroral reflections in this dam behind this tree. So very random scene, just didn't know about this tree being there. It was just something we found on the road. So it's not a special location or anything like that, but it just goes to show that you can create your own special moments.
It's got a lot
if you're willing to go out there and have a look around.
A lot of character, that tree, Luke. I'm sure the question's going to pop up. Give us a quick rundown on the settings that you might shoot for something like this. I see you got the stars.
Oh, yeah.
And the Aurora.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's about, I normally go, Aurora is a little bit different, but for Astro it's about 20 seconds. It does depend on the focal length of your lens. If you've got a nice wide angle lens, you can shoot a little bit longer. And the rationale behind that is the more wide angle your lens is, the smaller the star's rotation is relative to the size of frame. And so you can actually extend your exposure a little bit longer with a wider angle. So you're looking at something like a 14mm on full frame, and then also about 20 seconds. And then ISO 6400 is normally doable with most modern cameras these days. This is actually a panorama as well, just to fit everything in. So that would be the main settings with that. And to be honest, the hardest part's actually getting the focus right. Those settings are pretty easy to remember. In fact, you can even program them in as a custom setting in your camera. So it's very easy to switch to Astro mode, I call it. So that's not a problem. But yes, it's definitely good fun to do. So that's the settings, Adam.
Yeah, magic,
That's
mate.
the special sauce.
The special sauce, I love it. I love it. Hey, quick question on Aurora as well.
Yeah.
I notice it's a little bit different to maybe what we saw from some of Mika's shots yesterday, where there's some definite bands running through the sky. Do you get some of those?
Oh, yes.
In Tassie?
Yeah, well, the interesting fact about the Aurora in Tassie is that we are just not far south enough to see it like you see it in Norway. So if you're in Antarctica or Macquarie Island or a place much further south, you'll see it very much like in Norway. And I have seen it in Norway myself as well. The thing is, Norway is right on the edge of the Arctic Circle, which I think is 30 or 33 degrees north. And so we are, you know, we're in Tassie, I think we're 40 odd degrees. So we're quite a bit removed from that Arctic, or the Antarctic Circle. And so we're not really far south enough to see those big sort of beams and pillars and things like that. But we do get beautiful glows. And there is one shot I've got in here, which I think Adam used on Instagram as well in the promo, where it was really quite tall. And sometimes you can get maybe 45 degrees off the horizon, that sort of height, but certainly not overhead or anything like that. If it was overhead here, you'd get a pretty awesome show on the mainland as well, actually. So yeah, so that's good times to see it. Normally is March, April, or around September, October, around the equinoxes. But you can see it all year round. Generally easier to see it in winter because the nights are longer, but it can happen in summer too. So it really doesn't discriminate that way. It's more about what's happening with the sun and any solar activity that's happening out there. Yeah. So the next one is, this is a place called Brewster Lavender Estate. It's also my beautiful background. Yes. It's one of my favourite locations in Tassie, and it only really flowers in early January. If you ever come over to Tassie around New Year's, it's a really good time to come visit Brewster Lavender Estate. I know quite a few mainland photographers come over specifically to photograph here because it's just so pretty. And there's a beautiful old oak tree in the centre there that you can just line it all up. And obviously you've got vanishing point for days with these leading lines of the lavender rose, works for sunrise and sunset because it's sort of more of a south-facing location. So it's sort of built for photographers. And luckily the owners are actually super... they get social media, I suppose, and they just love people coming and photographing it because it's free promotion for them. So that they're very smart that way. So and even drone friendly if you fly after hours and ask permission. So it's pretty amazing. So, and I've even actually taken an infrared version of this scene just to play around a little bit, and you can actually really see how the definition, obviously the lavender now has turned to white because of all of the chlorophyll, and the leaves have caused that whiter colour. But then you've got a huge contrast between the clay sort of soil and the rose there. So it's sort of the sky is probably not quite the right sort of sky for this kind of shot, but you get the idea anyway. I thought I'd throw that in there.
Oh, it's magic, mate. And can you going to this lavender farm, can you just rock up there, or you need to ring them in advance, or how does that work?
I think it's nice to ring them in advance out of courtesy. I believe that. I always do anyway. I let them know. I think it's just the right thing to do, especially because you're there after their actual operating hours. So you're some random that's just turning up on their property. I think it's quite courteous to let people know. 100%. But you won't get a no unless there's some sort of operational reason, or maybe someone's filming, or there's some other thing like that. But that's pretty rare. So it is pretty busy, so you probably won't be on your own. That's for sure. But even with photographers, but it's definitely worth it still, and quite easy to work and find a composition without people in it. People are normally quite respectful there, so that was really good. This is another scene. I actually took this shot for Tourism Tasmania. Lucky enough for them to get me to take some pictures at the start of last year, and just shows the beautiful sunrise you can get there, a bit of a sun star. So, cloudless sky doesn't matter, just fill a foreground instead, and it still can look really pretty. And the good thing about cloudless sky is you will get a nice sun star because there's going to be nothing obstructing the sun as it breaches the horizon. So that's pretty cool.
And what settings are best for sun stars, Luke? What settings do you use
to get that? I normally go f16 to f. I mean, the thing I like about f16 is it's kind of probably usable in itself without having to go to f22 or anything like that. And f22, you're going to start to get a bit of diffraction, a bit of softening. So this depends on your lens, of course. This lens just happens to have a really pleasing looking sun star. So that one really helped a lot. So it does depend, but you're going to have to stop down to a smaller aperture basically to get that effect. Some people like to focus stack or blend in like a f/22 shot just for the sun star, and then have a f/11 or whatever's your sharpest aperture for the foreground as well. So you can play around with that too. This is Quartz Island taken in the moonlight. That's a little island off the southern part of Bruny Island, Cape Bruny. Very beautiful location down there. And the good old Cradle Mountain. One thing I really try and do when I'm here is trying to get a bit of separation. So I like when you don't have intersecting objects within a composition. And so here I've very deliberately placed this this rock so that it's not intersecting with this reflection in this cliff here. And so it makes it really challenging to get right, and you have to really play around with heights and angles and things. But I feel it's more pleasing when you don't have those sort of intersections going on in a scene like that.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's really hard to get a beautiful crystal clear morning like this with reflections. I've shot there many, many times, and so it's always very special when you get these sort of mornings. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And then this is Cradle in the Snow. So there's a huge variation actually in the conditions that you can get in Cradle Mountain. And so here we've got, some sort of alpine little pools or tarns that have filled up. I think all of the tannins and that leach in there, giving it a bit of a yellower colour. It does look like a bit of suspicious colour when you're looking at snow and see yellow, but I believe it's natural. I really hope it is. And so, it's a beautiful scenes there. You can also do astrophotography in Cradle because you're facing south. And so it's actually one of the best Aurora locations in Tasmania too. You've got the most classic view in Tasmania pretty much. And it just so happens that it works perfectly for auroras and star trails. So that's pretty cool.
And Luke, can you still get...
It gets really cold at night. So you do have to make sure that you rug up and take the right precautions if you're going to do this. This is moonlit as well. So that's why there's so much detail in the foreground. Almost looks a bit like daytime. And with your moonlit nights, you also get a really blue sky. And so here you can see that really blue tinge to the sky. Makes it look like daylight, but it's just moonlight.
Yeah, and can you still get access to this particular area, Cradle Mountain, in the middle of the night, or?
Yeah, to be honest, haven't been keeping too much tabs on it. Cradle's undergoing significant development at the moment, and they're upgrading a lot of facilities. They've put in a shuttle bus now, so you can't actually drive into the car park yourself during operational hours, I think 9 to 5 or something like that.
Yep.
You can drive in, I believe, before then, but then you need to follow a bus out. So it's getting a bit more restricted. It used to be easy as you go, just drive in. Now it's getting, because of the popularity of tourism, that it may change depending on how things pan out with COVID and things, but I believe it'll be quite, it's going to get harder and harder to do these sort of things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you can do it now, because who knows, there's every chance, or I don't think it will ever happen, but there's some of the suggestions they're putting around suggest that it would be very hard for photographers to actually make it even in there for sunrise. Wow. That's a real concern. So just watch that space. This is, sorry, I didn't talk about this one, but it's on Cradle Plateau. Look, Cradle Mountain looks super different depending on the angle that you actually look at it. And so in this case, I'm sort of further around the side and just got some really beautiful evening light here across the landscape in the foreground. And this is moving on to a different spot in Kosciuszko National Park. One of the most amazing shoots of my life, actually. We had, it was totally fogged out like this, and we had my friend Jake is actually shining a light on the top of this amazing tour that's there, and then the fog cleared, and then it was totally crystal clear, and we could actually see very faint Milky Way as well. So sort of a shoot that had everything at a location at the time that hadn't really been photographed very much. So we were really in our element. It was probably one of the coldest shoots I've ever done as well. I think it was at least -10. I couldn't actually put my tripod, like I couldn't unscrew it to even put it back up and collapse it, because it was frozen.
Frozen solid.
Unbelievable conditions.
Oh,
This is Narrabeen. I used to live in Sydney. I live in Tasmania now, but this is the iconic boardwalk there with the Milky Way behind. And so you can line it up. It's actually one of those rare locations where it just all really works. You do have to take note of the light that's above the boardwalk because that'll blow out the scene. So you actually have to wait for a time when the light's not on. And obviously clear conditions. So a few things need to line up, but yeah, it's an amazing scene when the conditions are right and you can get the Milky Way. I love it when things just work like that, and that's definitely one of those places. This is another one of those places. This is a location in Tassie, and yeah, the same sort of thing. You can get the Milky Way lining up perfectly with it at particular times, and you got that great leading line. I'm also standing there, sort of just to give another bit of figure of interest and maybe a bit of what's that person doing there. You know, bit of a interesting sort of scene to create like that. And then that light in the background is actually the sunrise. So this is taken quite early in the morning. And you can see the faint glow of sunrise coming through in the back there, because obviously I was shooting east to get the eastern rise of the Milky Way.
Magic, I love it.
This is an autumnal scene from Tassie. This is also in Cradle Mountain Lake St Clair National Park. It's not actually Cradle Mountain in the background though, but you get this beautiful. It's called Phagus, which is, well, that's the sort of colloquial name. It's actually Northofagus gunnii is the actual name, and so that's where Phagus comes from. The genus is Northofagus, and so you got a nice pandani, Richia pandanifolia, and some sort of, I think they're certain kind of pine, but then you got this beautiful native deciduous beech tree that just turns this beautiful gold color, and you get that reflected in the water at this location with a big, huge peak behind. And yeah, it's just a magical place to be. So that's another classic sort of Tasmanian autumn scene. Unfortunately, everybody's missed out on shooting the Phagus, literally everybody, except for maybe a handful of park rangers, because that normally turns around Anzac Day every year, April 25th. And so by now the leaves are going to be starting to drop off. And so it's probably maybe one of the first years since, you know, modern photography that no one's been able to photograph it.
Yeah.
This is also that same location that I had earlier, and you've got some really beautiful light on this pandani in the foreground, plus you know, a big, huge band of sunset light just sort of coming in, and so there was a horizon gap, and you can see the top of the horizon gap has actually created this band across the mountain range, which I thought looked really quite interesting.
It does,
and it also shows that this was, I think, on a different trip, if I remember rightly. So it also shows it's kind of nice to revisit some of your compositions, shoot them in different light. You never know what kind of conditions you're going to get there. So I'm a big fan of reshooting compositions, and until you feel like you've got enough, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not against cliches or anything like that. I think you're entitled to have your own version of a beautiful scene if you like. It's just more about your impact in getting there and making sure that you're being responsible about that, and not you kind of you know, you've got to you can see that the shot's there. It's not bashing through and doing whatever you can to get there. You still have to have your wits about you and make sure that you're not damaging the environment.
Yeah, 100%.
This is another shot of that tour. So you can see again, I've got completely different conditions this time. And this time we're actually hoping to shoot some astrophotography, and we'll had this terrible high cloud, which is bad news for astrophotography. If you have any high cloud, you're going to have a problem. And so I don't know why we're wanting to shoot astro, because there was such a moon out anyway. But anyway, I guess it's just nice to be up there. But what actually happened was, and I think you've got a great shot of this phenomenon as well, Adam, is that the moon shone through the high cloud and created I think they're called 22-degree halo.
Yeah.
And so it's actually a refraction of light through the ice crystals in the upper atmosphere there, and it was actually used as the cover shot of the Bureau Meteorology calendar in 2018. Cool. So that was quite an honour to have that, because the Bureau Meteorology take their calendar pretty seriously. So that was pretty cool. So
Couple
just
of
goes to show that visiting the same spot and you get different conditions, you can create totally different images,
Gotcha. A
and
couple
you
of
can
quick
get lucky sometimes as well.
audience questions, mate. Just a quick
Yeah.
ones. Sonia asked, "What month was that little boat shed shot?" I guess she's wondering when the Milky Way lines up there.
Yeah, so that's always more early in the season. So whenever you're getting if you ever see a Milky Way shot and it's got the sun rising underneath it, you're talking January, February generally,
Yeah,
because the way that I don't want to go take a while to describe where the Milky Way is at different times of year, but
sure.
essentially, whenever you're getting the Milky Way just above a scene where you've got the sun rising, it's generally in your Januaries and Februaries, quite early in the year,
Gotcha.
because yeah, you as the year winds on, the Milky Way rises earlier and earlier. So right now it's probably going to be up just after sunset, actually. Whereas at this time it was, probably 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning or something like that.
Yeah,
And because it's summer, you're having to get up pretty early to do these sort of things. But
absolutely.
Obviously the results are worth it.
Absolutely.
The good thing about that time of the morning is there is nobody around, so you've got it all to yourself.
100%. One more quick question. Graham asks, when you're shooting snow, do you expose to the right to get the whites? How do you get those whites handled with the snow? I know that can be difficult myself too.
Yeah, it's super difficult. I'm not an expert on snow shooting. There's a lot of people that do a lot better job with snow than I do. I normally shoot -1, so I'm an aperture priority shooter pretty much most of the time, unless I'm, doing Astro or something like that where I need manual.
Yeah,
So with that, I normally shoot it very commonly about -1 EV, and that's because the dynamic range of the Sony sensors that I use allows me a lot of latitude, and if there's any really bright highlights, I'm going to be able to recover those.
makes
And
sense.
so if I'm in the snow, I might just bump that up to 0 instead, so that I'm not underexposing quite so much,
Sure,
because there's going to be bright light on the ground as well as in the sky. So that can sort of help to mediate that.
sure.
And then just really keeping an eye on your histogram as well, and making sure that that's not blowing out on the right side, and overexposing basically. So that's probably the best approach, but it is easy to underexpose in the snow otherwise.
Yeah,
It's a good question. Yeah. And then the hardest part with snow is actually trying to get that detail back out of the snow and post
in the
processing.
snow
I find
itself.
that quite
Yeah,
a challenge myself, actually. But yeah, it's a good challenge.
I
This is a
found.
shot of did you have any more there, Adam?
Oh no, I was just going to say, I found. Do you ever use that Nick filter, the detail extraction filter, for that
I
kind of
don't
thing, or not?
actually. I do use Nick. I use color effects a lot, actually. But I don't actually use a detail extractor, but it's an interesting thing that I might play with next
Yeah,
time.
maybe.
Thanks for the idea. But yeah, it's something that yeah, we've all got our little areas that we can know more about, and that's probably one for me. I guess it's also because I don't shoot snow a lot.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not.
yeah. Me either.
There is a fair bit of snow in Tassie, but it's not the main thing I shoot. So
Yeah.
it's always one of those things. But yeah, it's a good question. Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about this one. This one is Federation Peak. This is Sir Edmund Hillary's said that this is Australia's only real mountain. And I guess he's looking at it more from a mountaineering climbing perspective. A lot of Australia's mountains are just basically glorified hills, but this is a full-on mountain. And I
Yep.
think this is the tallest cliff in Australia. This is Lake Jeeves down here, and this cliff from I can't remember the height, but it is a seriously long way. And people summit this mountain. I don't know how, and that's certainly something that it's not on my list. I can tell you that.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be a hell of a fall going down there. That thing there's called the Blade. There's a really amazing Tasmanian film called Winter on the Blade, and it's worth looking at just to see how crazy some people can go in these sort of places. Getting into this place in winter is just ridiculous, and then going on rock climbing and doing these sort of things is something I just can't comprehend. This was taken from a plane on the way. Actually, it was a dedicated flight that we did over the southwest. Obviously, we didn't quite get the conditions that we wanted.
Sure.
At the time, I wasn't living in Tassie, so we sort of just had to go with whatever conditions we got. So ideally, my dream is to get a shot like this with snow on a bluebird day. Would be absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, it just goes to show that there is some pretty amazing places in Tassie that that just not many people get to because they're just so hard to get to.
Yeah.
This is Flinders Island, so that's probably going from one stream to another. We're really remote, hard to. Well, this is still quite remote, to be honest, but you know, really craggy, really sort of you know, inaccessible peak, and you've got this beautiful coastal scene where you've got the lichens, you've got some black and some orange, and this sort of coming in and leading the eye into the frame with Mount Strzelecki in the background. I probably would have liked to have compressed this shot a little bit more to make Mount Strzelecki in the back there a bit larger, but I didn't have that much time before the light went. But yeah, it's just one of those sort of really pleasing scenes that I've always liked. Flinders Island is a really, it's not very commonly photographed, but if you want to go to a location where you've got so many amazing seascapes, and the whole place is like, if you've been to Bay of Fires, this is like Bay of Fires, but the whole island basically, and it's a big island. It takes about an hour to drive from top to bottom at least. So yeah, if you're ever interested, I do actually run private workshops on Flinders Island. I've been over there about 4 or 5 times, at least 5 times, and run a couple of workshops already over there. So if you're ever keen, do let me know, because it's a great destination. So just small workshops. There are normally only 1 or 2 people. So I'm always willing to go back. In fact, I don't really make any money out of it. It's just an excuse for me to get over there again.
Beautiful.
So so absolutely love it.
What's your website,
One of
Luke?
my favourite locations.
Where can we get more info on that?
I'll just send me an email, luke@luketscharke.com, and I can sort out a time. Obviously, with COVID, it might be a ways off, but there is direct flights to Flinders Island from Melbourne, from Essendon Airport, or you can fly in from Launceston as well. So, so it's certainly something to look forward to. And if it's something that you're keen to do a year or 2 down the track, then absolutely just send me a message and we can tee something up. It's not as expensive as you might think as well. So, and it's a great time away. Another Aurora shot, not maybe one of my favorite shots, is actually one of the frames of a time lapse, which I haven't put together yet. So it's going to be a hell of a time lapse when I do put it together. I don't do much time lapsing, but when I do, I try and pick good conditions for it. This is one example of a big Aurora. You've got this is a 12mm lens, so this is quite a wide scene. That would be good 45 degrees up in the sky, and you can see all these beams. To give you an idea of how strong this Aurora was, this was on a full moon night, literally the full moon, 100% moon, and you can still see the Aurora and the beam. So if this was dark with a very low luminosity moon, it would have been absolutely incredible. But not that it wasn't already. So I just like to include that just to show, because this scene faces south as well. So it's another iconic Tasmanian scene that just happens to face south, and so you can get the Aurora directly behind it, which I really love.
Oh, brilliant.
What's next? Just need to click on that one. Just some aerial shots as well of Freycinet. So there's a bit of a Freycinet over the next few shots. You've got the shot that I just showed you was taken back here on Coles Bay, and then this is looking the other side, and you can actually see Wineglass Bay on this side, and you've got the Hazard Mountain Range, and then looking off into the distance. That's a view from Wineglass Bay, looking back towards the hazards. And these are really hard shots to take, and the reason why is that if you're not using a housing for your camera, you're really only centimeters from the water, so you've got to be super smart, I don't think I'm super smart, but you've got to have your wits about you when you're doing this, because it's pretty easy to drown your camera if a little wave comes by or something like that. But to really accentuate these great, like I don't know what you call them, I guess ripples, or the light refraction patterns that are happening from the sunlight coming into the clear water. You just get down really low and take a nice and you take a lot of these too, by the way. This is just probably the best one I found with the best patterns. And then just try and make it work. And thankfully there was also just a beautiful, nice little amount of high cloud above the hazards here too. But yeah, I always love taking those sort of shots. It's you don't normally think of taking nice shots in the middle of the day, but there's certainly still things to photograph in the middle of the day.
Absolutely.
This wasn't the middle of the day, because you kind of need the sun shining right down into the water to make this work.
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite panoramas I've taken actually from the air. And this is it's about 8 frames taken with a 50mm lens, 55mm lens. and you just, you know, shoot like across like that as you're flying. And because there's you are obviously moving, but there's very little parallax error when you're up there, so everything stitches together still pretty well right. In fact, this stitched perfectly in Lightroom first go, no problem. So yeah, so that's what you can do, and I need to do more of those actually. They're really effective, and you end up with a huge resolution file as well, so you can do a lot with these sort of files.
Really?
I've actually cropped at 16:9 here. It actually goes a little bit wider than this as well. But you've got here the Hazard Mountain Range, and this is Wineglass Bay here. You can even see a few little boats here, which if you zoomed in full, you can see a lot of detail on. And then you've got Hazards Beach here, and this is called Hazards Lagoon. And so you've kind of got this isthmus here that's connecting the hazards to the rest of the Freycinet Peninsula, and this is all just sand here basically. So yeah, it's a pretty cool little location. Just how these peaks just come straight out of the land and right on the coast like that. It's amazing.
What time of the day was that, Luke? It looks, I love the light.
Early, that's sunrise. Sunrise is the best for this sort of angle. I guess with sunset, your sun's going to be over here, shining back this way, so you'd be a bit more backlit. There's a Freycinet Air take people up there. If you ever want to do a flight, let me know. I'm happy to take people up. I've done that a few times.
Nice.
And Freycinet Air take people up, and it's I think it's only you basically will get a shot like this for about $350, something like that. So I think it's pretty good money spent to be able to go up and do that. So that they do get a bit of fog sometimes. There can be a few challenges, but yeah, I think it's one of the best value for money flights in Australia actually. In terms of what imagery you can get from it. Yeah, and this is Kelvedon Boat Shed, which lost its roof not that long ago in a storm, and thankfully they replaced it. I love it when people actually look after photography locations rather than letting them go to rack and ruin. And this is my friend Kale, and he's shining his torch up. I don't know why he'd be doing that, but it just looks cool. And if he wasn't there, I think it doesn't have that human element or that personal feel to the image. You know, I'm not the best at describing feelings or things like that through imagery, but I feel like having a person there really does help to bring a bit of a connection to the stars and the cosmos and the human experience of that. And then I put I think it was a head torch in red mode in the actual shed. Don't know why I chose red. I think it does look pretty cool though. It
does, yeah.
And and just lined all that up. So it always liked that shot. It was a really fun night spent with some friends, and I really hope it's not too long before we can all go out with our friends and shoot again, because those sort of evenings are what life's all about, I think.
Definitely.
And this is from Flinders Island again, this time taken from the air. And it's showing beautiful Killiecrankie Bay. So I think it's up there with Wineglass Bay and Whitehaven and a few of those other bays. It's absolutely spectacular. And just like Coles Bay and Hazards, there's this beautiful Mount Killiecrankie in the distance. And so, yeah, it's just probably one of the lesser known beaches in Australia, but I think it's an absolutely phenomenal beach. Even how this I think that's Killiecrankie Creek coming into the bay there as well. Really well known crayfish fishing area as well. So yeah, it's a lot going on Flinders. I love it. This is on Mount Wellington, looking out over the lights of Hobart. If you ever get a chance to go to Mount Wellington at night, it's getting harder and harder because they close it if there's going to be a forecast of ice up there. It gets really cold up in Mount Wellington. It's just above Hobart. And you know, it might be 10 degrees in Hobart, but it could be sub-zero up on Mount Wellington. So, and very windy. It might be calm in Hobart, but super windy up there. So you've got to always rug up if you're going to go up on Mount Wellington. But you can just get some amazing conditions and light, and different things can happen while you're up there. And some of my favourite shoots have been up on the mountain, and it's only 30 minutes from where I live, so I'm very lucky. This is my friend Steve, and we just put a light between his legs just for dramatic effect, I suppose. And he's looking out over the city just in a sort of a kind of a hero kind of pose, I guess. And yeah, just you can really see the light, the ambient lights just lighting up the side here, which I think gives a nice sort of bit of catch light. And the other really thing that's cool about this location, unfortunately I don't have the shot, but it does face east as well, so at certain times of year you will actually get the Milky Way core here as well, which is really awesome. And this is the same scene. So it's again revisiting the same place, but in totally different conditions, and still getting that same beautiful catch light, but this time from the sun. It's my friend Mel Finley. And what I really love is her scarf is just, I couldn't have made that, it
No.
do it any better if I tried. It just happened to click the shutter when the scarf was not intersecting at all with any of the land there. I think that really makes the shot. We weren't trying for that to happen. It just was one of those moments. But yeah, you have to do exposure bracketing when you shoot into the sun. It just wouldn't be possible to capture a scene like this in one frame. So there's a little bit of processing that you need to do to make it look like the highlights aren't blown. I'm still probably not super happy with this edit. I probably would have liked to have had it look even a bit brighter back here. I might have pulled back on the highlights too much, but then photographers also don't like to see big blown out spots in their images either from the sun. Well, the sun's super bright, you can't look at it, so it should be blown out, but then you don't want it to look ugly either. So it's always a bit of a challenge dealing with how you make a sun star or sun look when you're shooting into the sun. I always have huge debates with myself and how I need to process those sort of things to make them look reasonable. And this is Mount Wellington in the snow. So you can see that, and this is actually taken literally at the same spot, but just turned around, looking the other way. And so now you're seeing Mount Wellington in its true like wintry coat. And this is the observation area. And obviously this isn't a great image, but I just like to include it just to show the variation in conditions you can get in Tassie. And one reason why I love living down here, because you do get true seasons, and that brings so many different opportunities. And so you can go back to the same place and photograph in all these different seasons and conditions, and auroras and astro and sunrise, sunset, you know, nightscape, star trails, and you can so you can shoot the same location 10 different ways and it will look completely different. And I absolutely love that. And this is facing south, so you can actually get the aurora behind this scene as well. So something that I've been trying to do.
Yeah, that'd look great.
Yeah. How are we going for time, Adam? I'm not taking too long, am I?
Oh no, you're fine, mate. You're fine. Yeah, absolutely. This is the good stuff. Here we go. This is what I've been waiting for.
Yeah, cool. This is a place called Lake Oberon. It's very, very challenging to get to location. It's at least a 5-day return walk to get here, and it's very like knee-deep mud. You know, you have to carry everything on your back to get out there. So you don't just you can't just jump out of the car in the car park and go for a little hike and you're there. It's a serious undertaking where you need at least 5 to 7 days. Our packs were weighing at 25 to 30 kilos with enough food to take, and 4-season tents. And you know, I'm not trying to say people shouldn't go, but at the same time, if you are going to try to visit a place like this, there's very, very high level of outdoor experience required. And I'm not saying that I'm the best outdoorsman by any means, but I had put a lot of effort into learning that sort of stuff before I first went here. In fact, I researched for a whole year before I even went, pretty solidly, including weighing everything that I carried, and putting it in a spreadsheet and analysing what I could buy again that was lighter, and working out the best foods to eat. And you know, it was a very intensive process, so it's certainly not a light undertaking. All right, that's my safety spiel. Anyway, this is taken at night, obviously. It doesn't immediately perhaps look like that, but that's actually the moon. So the moon's shining straight onto this foreground, which lit it up beautifully. And then you've got the Milky Way core just behind the peaks here of Mount Pegasus. And so this shot really works because the moon's in it. And if I didn't actually have the moon in the shot, and I've actually gone back and I thought, well, wouldn't it look amazing if I shot it with no moon at all? And I did that, and I couldn't see anything in the foreground at all, because the moon here is lighting it all up. So it's one of those happy situations where you think, oh, the moon's in the shot, might ruin it. Well, actually, it made the shot. So, and it's not a strong moon, I have to say as well. I think it was only 20% or so in luminosity. So it looks round, but in reality, it wasn't a round moon at the time. And I think that's helped massively as well in terms of, not if it was a full moon, you wouldn't be able to really get any definition out of the Milky Way core and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. There's a little meteor here as well. I had to do a lot of work in terms of balancing the light and making it so there was some detail here, but not making,
Yeah.
getting the right contrast going and that sort of thing. It's also focus stacked as well. So I took a frame for the foreground and a frame for the back, because if you're shooting at 2.8, you're normally shooting really wide open with these sort of shots. If you have anything close, that's going to be out of focus, and so you have to take a frame for the foreground and then one for the background and then put them together. It's just what you have to do. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit soft in the foreground. It still is a little bit soft in the foreground, but it's never going to be perfect with these sort of astro shots.
Yeah.
It was very windy. I had my friend Dylan Toe there, and he insisted on keeping using his red light. So half of my foregrounds are covered in red light. I'm not too happy about, but Dylan's a good guy, so I'll let him off.
Dylan. Shout out for Dylan.
And so those sort of things can happen with these sort of shoots. So, but yeah, the overall result was good, and it won me the David Malin Award Astrophotography competition in 2018, which I was very, very grateful for. I couldn't believe it, actually. Normally, all of the winners are these amazing deep space images of galaxies and stars and those sort of things. So to have a nightscape image win that was a real honour.
Oh, look, I think this is the best astro image I've ever seen.
Oh, thanks, Adam.
Yeah, it's absolutely spectacular, and I think it's an incredible balance, because I mean, I love astro in general, but often it's really focused on the stars and the Milky Way itself, isn't it? Without too much emphasis
exactly
on the foreground.
My approach on astrophotography, and I spoke to a very famous photographer in New Zealand. What's his name? Mental blank. I hate it when this happens. He's based on the south coast anyway, in Okarito, and I went into his gallery, and he was talking to me about astro, and I asked him if he ever got into astro, and he said, well, to me, I don't get into it because anyone can take a picture of a Milky Way, but putting it into an actual landscape scene is another thing altogether.
Yeah.
And I really feel like it's important to tie the foreground and the background together and make it into something that's it should be a great shot. If you cut off the top half or you cut off the sky part, it should still be a great shot.
Yeah.
Put it that way. I guess it's one thing why I'm quite anti people, and I know maybe yourself have. I guess I find it hard when people put in a Milky Way that wasn't there, because for me, the sky in the foreground is actually the whole scene, and that's the this is an east-facing location, and so the Milky Way should be in that position.
Absolutely.
And so that's why it works. And so I guess I don't have a problem with people's creativity and dropping skies in and that sort of thing if people are sort of acknowledge that. But it's one of those things I'm really passionate about, because you put a lot of planning and time into getting to these locations to be able to capture these sort of conditions and have it all work. So. There's always different points of view on things like this, but
definitely, and I completely respect
something I'm passionate about, and what kind of makes it exciting and worthwhile for me, because you could plan this shot for years and try and go out there and do it, and it just doesn't work out. So so anyway, that's my sermon.
No, I think for me, Luke, I think a shot like this one here becomes more valuable in a sense, because it's all captured in that one shot. I can go and make something with a Milky Way and a mountain range and a foreground and all this and that. But I think for me, the charm and the value to this image and why it's so appealing is because you've captured something that's so breathtaking in one single shot, and it was actually there and it was happening. And yeah, I mean that's your story.
It's really interesting too, because David Malin actually called me. Oh no, he didn't call me, but the competition organizer called me when he was they had to validate basically things about it, and he said, David thinks the image was taken at about 3 a.m. Is that right? And I said, and I went back to the EXIF data, And yes, it was taken at 3 a.m. And he was able to tell that because that's the position that the Milky Way should have been back on that date at that time, because of that. And so it does, these things are actually a record of time. And if you were to go through different apps or software, you could say when, you'd have to have a little bit of an idea, but you could actually reverse engineer and work out when these things were actually taken using that data. And obviously David has an immaculate knowledge of astrophotography and astronomy, so he could do those sort of things. I thought that was just absolutely amazing.
You've obviously printed this one out for that particular competition, Luke. How did it come up?
It came up all right, yeah. I mean, it's an Astro shot. It's taken at f2.8, so you're not normally wanting to shoot at 2.8,
sure.
And it's higher ISO, so you'd have to put in a lot of work to make an Astro image work in print. And it comes up pretty well. I've printed it off at A2 quite a bit, and plenty of detail there. Beautiful Sony sensor image. I think I took it with an A7R2 at the time, and so. If I'm not mistaken, I actually may have taken it also with an f4 lens, which is not ideal. Back in the day when I took it, the lens that I use now hadn't come out, and so I had to use all sorts of different lenses to make it work. And so it does also show that you don't necessarily need to be at 2.8, and I guess because there's so much light there from the moon, it just happened to work. So there you go as well.
Beautiful, mate. Spectacular.
I think it's from the same trip. There's the another shot of Lake Oberon here, looking down past the backlit pandani plants, Rico pandanifolia here, and you can see them all just dotted around as you're looking down. It's 300 meters from where I am down to the bottom here, and you can probably can't see on the feed, but there's a really small red dot here, which was actually our tent. And so to shoot up here for sunrise, we actually had to climb all the way up here, all the way through here, and then there's a vertical section here that you come up and then back around and then shoot here. So at least a 45-minute walk just to climb up out of there to get up and shoot for sunrise. And we had to do that every day because then we'd go back down for lunch and stuff like that, and because that's the official campsite, we want to follow the rules. And so that's what we did. So that's a lot of work goes into these, there was a few mornings when I was like, oh man, I really can't get up this morning. This is like, I'm so stuffed. But I'm like, then I realize where I am and what I've been planning to do and all of that. And I'm just like, no, I've just got to do it, and then when you're up and you're actually functional, you're like, oh, I can't believe I was thinking that earlier. But, I'm sure a lot of you out there who'd like to shoot sunrises would be feeling the same thing in the mornings. It's very easy to talk yourself out of these sort of things. So
every day.
I'm very grateful I got up in the end. And this is another view of Lake Oberon, but with a dead tree, sort of the branches coming through, and then you've got Lake Oberon in the distance there. So just a real different version of the scene that works really well. And then we've got another just different version. Obviously, I can't get enough of shooting this place, but you've got the sun star behind, which lines up beautifully at this time of year, and then you've got the 4 pandani plants that sort of make up a bit. I think you might have even mentioned to me, Adam, that sort of looks a bit like a Southern Cross, and just has a really nice dynamic to it. And you can still see the tent down there. I chose to leave the tent in there just because of not many people would notice that kind of detail, but I kind of like connecting the fact that I was there with that as well. And then that's shot from a similar location, but looking back. So that's actually the top of this peak, or maybe this one, I can't remember now, but you're a little bit higher up. So we're sort of, you can compress that looking back down through the layers of the Western Arthur Range there. And I think this won gold in the New South Wales Awards a few years ago. Just beautiful light, just all the way back. Very kind of pleasing image that you could look at for a long time. Which is you don't get too many of these sort of scenes in Australia, so it's pretty great to think that we didn't have to leave Australia to capture these sort of images. And this is actually taken at the same spot as the previous frame. So the previous frame is like this here, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And now I've gone all the way wide back, and I've framed this this sort of rock in the foreground, which was I was only a metre away from where I was standing, and you've got Lake Oberon here with the shadow of Mount Pegasus actually coming across the lake, which I always love, and the sun's just up here, which would be shining down on that to create that shadow. So that's sort of like more late morning. Great thing about Tassie is the light isn't quite so harsh earlier in the morning, especially if you've got a little bit of high cloud around, so you can sort of still shoot into the morning and get that beautiful depth from all of this mist and haze in the distance.
Magic, mate. Tom Putt says, we need to go back there in winter with snow. Have you taken Tom Putt in there before, have you, Luke?
Look, I don't know. I don't know if I'd take Tom. I think he's a bit of a cowboy. No, I think going there in winter would be
pretty intense.
I'll have to have a private chat with Tom about winter, but I think winter is risk versus return would be extremely low, and the conditions are pretty bad there. Like it looks great in these pictures because I've showed you when the weather was good for like the 10% of the time it was.
Yes.
But I think in winter you're probably going to get down to 5% or less. It's very I'm not keen on it. Put it that way. I'm pretty happy shooting when I know that I'm going to have at least a day or two where we'll have good weather and actually come back with some usable images.
Sure.
But it would be amazing in snow. I think
you're
probably looking at something that would be better from the air on a bluebird day with good conditions rather than never say never, right?
Yeah. And you could get a plane in there or a helicopter in there, Luke, or?
Yeah, you can't take helicopters to any national park in Tassie, so you're not allowed to chopper in and just land somewhere and off you go. You can't do that. The national parks can because they have to do maintenance and things like that, but any commercial flights are big no-no. So you can fly over. You could take a chopper too, and if you don't land, it's still sort of, people love the fact that you're out in nature and you're out in wilderness and you haven't seen anybody for days and things. So then the thought of a plane coming over, a helicopter coming over, is kind of bad because you're trying to get away from it all and you can't because there's all these planes and helicopters everywhere. So I'm not even sure how happy I am about flying over some of these places, but I think if you do it every now and then, it's not a problem. It's just it's one of those things that we sort of need to protect our wilderness in Tassie, and it's a bit of a debate whether or not planes and helicopters actually kind of take away that wilderness as well. There's certainly a big debate with Lake Malvina at the moment, where they're looking at helicoptering private guests into what they're turning into a private island, and they're trying to really limit that, and I think it's a really great thing. So anyway, that's another story for another day. Thanks for the question, Tom. We'll be in touch. And this is Bluff again, this time with Scoparia. So it's another beautiful plant you get in Tassie. So it's actually really interesting. The foreground of these ones here, that's Rickeya pandanifolia, and this is Rickeya scoparia here. And this is the same plant in this one here, Richia Rickeya scoparia, but it's flowering this time. And so you've got these beautiful, they're actually that as big as they look. They're probably only 5 centimeters at the most, but when you get up nice and close, they really do pop, and when they're backlit like this, they can look really awesome as well. So and I've done trips specifically to photograph Scoparia because it is a beautiful plant when it's flowering en masse like this. And this is another Aurora shot. This is the Portico of Light, I call it, which is off the highway near Ross in Tasmania, the main highway between Hobart and Launceston. I passed it heaps of times, and there was this one night where we knew that it was going to go off. We didn't have much notice, but we knew that the cloud around Hobart was going to be really bad, and we had to drive north. And I was like, man, all right, I don't know of anywhere north that we can go. And then I realized, no, I do. This portico, I remember that thinking it would be awesome to do an astro shoot or something with this portico. So we drove up there, and luckily the it's actually part of a cherry farm, and luckily there was some people out having a fire near the entrance to where you drive in, and we could drive in there and actually ask them if it was okay to photograph because it's on private property, and they said, "Yep, no problem." They had no idea why we would want to be doing that, but anyway, so we actually could drive right up to this. You can see the road here actually, just on the left, and yeah, we're just only shooting for about 10 minutes, and this happened, and it just went totally off. And this is sort of a wide angle lens, so you're looking at 45 degrees in the sky again, yeah, it's just an amazing moment. I'd only just got back from Norway, seeing all these giant auroras, and then come home and we had a massive one here as well. So that was pretty amazing to think that I didn't have to go all the way to Norway to see it, although it wasn't like looking up and it's all overhead and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. And so I put a little light inside just to light up the portico, just to give a more of a homely feel to it. I think if I didn't have the light in there, it just would have felt a bit more sterile maybe. So some people say it looks a bit incongruous having the light on, but I kind of like that. I think it gives it a bit of a ethereal kind of mood. So yeah, so it was definitely one of my favorite shots and moments behind the camera for sure.
Looks like a gateway to another
just go
world.
through these quickly. Don't want to take your time up too much.
Oh,
but
you're right,
this is Southwest National Park, and so that mountain in the distance is called Mount Anne, and it's a very, very beautiful. Like I think it's probably the most beautiful place in the world. I think it's definitely my favorite. Very hard to get to as well, and I would say it's the hardest, or probably second hardest day of walking I've ever had in my life. The hardest was probably in Nepal more recently, but yeah, very, very challenging to get to. But you know, you get the rewards in the end. Yeah, amazing big cushion plants, which is a native Tasmanian plant that you get here, which is ringed here by pineapple grass. You can see there's a few flower heads on the cushion plant, and then we're looking back towards Mount Anne here, and I think Mount Lot back here as well, if I can recall correctly, and then some pandani plants as well. So yeah, it's all sorts going on, and this is the same location but with some mist, so it changes completely. In fact, it was the next day, so it's not like a different time. It changes very rapidly and completely up there. I just love this shot of this giant pandani. Must have been at least maybe 10 meters tall, and obviously very, very many years old. I don't know how fast they grow, but it's going to have to be quite a few years old. And then you've just got this beautiful pineapple grass and rich scoparia, and some cushion plants as well. The thing I love about Tassie, you get to know the plants quite well, and so it really helps to your overall understanding of the scene and more of a connection to the scene as well. And that's another one from up there, just looking back across the cushion plant, and we've got the sunrise, and I think I did a exposure blend just to control this this bright highlights here, I probably would have liked to have shot with a wider lens here, just a little bit wider, but it still works quite well. I found this cushion plant there that had like a heart shape. Always really loved that. It's always nice to find.
Awesome.
I know Adam's a master of it too, finding like a symbolism in the landscape or something like that. And so that was really beautiful. Cool. Moving on now to the Tscharke, and this is had a little bit of a notch in a craggy rock that I lined up with the sun to get the sun star coming through that. It just really gives a really cool effect.
Incredible.
And the really rugged coastline in the Tscharke, you know, sort of the kind of rock that if you slip over and fell on it, you wouldn't. You'd come off pretty badly, but it's just a beautiful coastline as well. I think there's a saying in Tassie called brutal beauty. Try saying that 10 times fast, but it's a real kind of ruggedness but there's beauty in that, and I love that sort of juxtaposition. Tessellated pavement, getting the beautiful reflections coming off this sunrise. It's good to shoot there in sort of a mid-tide or just after the tide's been high going out, so that all of these pools are filled with water. You don't really want the waves coming over you though, but the water does sit in these pools for a while after, and that's really good. And certain times of year you'll get the sun lining up here. I think this was April, so that's a good time to try and get the sun lining up with it. Otherwise it can be off the side or behind here, but I think it's nice to actually have it in the frame like that. Great Barrier Reef,
Oh,
best flight
wow.
I've ever done.
Yeah.
I know Adam's done that in their
Yeah.
Black and Blue in the Light Collective. It is the most gobsmackingly beautiful thing you will ever see in your life from the air. And the pictures never do justice, because I always find when you convert it to sRGB, it just rips out all of the cyans. And so you really don't believe the what you're actually seeing when you fly over it, because there's so many photos that can't actually capture the depth of color that's actually out in that sort of landscape. So I really highly recommend it. It's very expensive to do, but you won't regret it one bit. Absolutely not. I've only got about 5 left, so I'll just keep chugging along.
Yeah, go for it.
We've got Tasman Island here. Did you have a question there, Adam? Or
No. There's a bunch of questions here. We'll run through them at the end if that's okay, mate.
okay, no dramas. So yeah, Cape Pillar. There's the blade out there. It's sort of like the end point of, well, not the end point, but sort of like the crescendo of the Three Capes walk. I'm lucky to do some work with Tasmanian Walking Company. We run their social media, and so I've been out there quite a few times, either with them or just on my own trips as well. Really about a 19k walk to get out to Cape Pillar if you do it as its own walk. So it's not a tiny little walk, but it's the rewards are there. You might see a theme coming with all of these walking, but rewards being there. The dolerite columns, the coastline, you've got Tasman Island off the end. Later in the evening too, this will be flashing, so you can get a really cool shot where you get a little bit of a light beam coming out of the lighthouse on Tasman Island. So yeah, just one of those dream photography locations.
Magic.
And then, you know, dreams can come true when you get a bit of a rainbow happening while you're out there on the edge. So when you're at these locations, you think, oh no, there's some rain coming. That's going to be terrible. I'm going to get wet. That's also the same time you've got to be thinking, but I could get a rainbow. So you're still going to be quite ready. You want to put your gear away so you don't get wet, but at the same time, you need to have it ready to get out quickly in case a rainbow or some amazing light happens. So it's always in the back of my mind whenever I'm out in especially if you've kind of got more at sunrise or sunset where the sun's lower to the horizon, it can still shine through the clouds. But yeah, and create that rainbow from the water droplets in the air. Another, this is a late season aurora, and you've got the Milky Way here setting in the western sky, and you can see the difference. So with this shot here, the Milky Way is very flat. And if I was to go back to this one here, you can see that the Milky Way is very, very, it's standing up. And so this is what the Milky Way looks like in the eastern sky earlier in the Milky Way season, like from January to May, something like that. And then going back to what we had before, this one here is flat. And that's what you get sort of in the late astro season from about sort of August to November, basically. And so you're looking pretty much south, so you can see the aurora here, and then you've got the Milky Way to the right. So you can get that kind of combination. This was in October, so gives you an idea of timing there. Again, early season this time, so we've got the aurora to the right and the Milky Way to the left, and that's looking in the eastern sky. So you've got that. This was a really cool little aurora that we shot March last year. Walls of Jerusalem, getting the face of Mount Jerusalem reflecting in the water below. Bit off track this spot, but it's always nice to find those little spots that mean something. So another shot of Freycinet that made its way in there. Sort of talked about that vantage point before, but it's definitely one of the, I think, I like to think of iconic or classic locations that or scenes that really define a place, and always try and focus on those and perfect those, and maybe even try several times to get them. I think it's really good because people will remember those significant images much more than just your general portfolio.
Yes.
And finally, don't know why this one ended up here, but the last shot is of tulips at Wynyard or what's the Table Cape. So that's another awesome thing to come over to Tassie and photograph, which happens in October, I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
Okay.
October. They have a tulip festival, and the whole fields just fill up with beautiful tulip blooms.
Looks
And then you
magic.
can also get a great shot with the Table Cape Lighthouse in the background, sort of looking across the scene that way as well. So it's sort of like I like wilderness stuff, but I also love to shoot just general anything beautiful, really. And in fact, I've got a project at the moment called Beauty of Tasmania, and the idea of that is that I just want to celebrate the beauty of these places, and I don't
Absolutely.
really care so much if it's wilderness, although I care deeply about the
Yeah.
wilderness, but I don't. It doesn't bother me if it's beauty in the wilderness or beauty on a jetty or beauty in a planted field of flowers. It's all beautiful, and I think it should all be celebrated.
Yeah.
Certainly, the wilderness areas need to be celebrated much more for what they mean and the significance and how they need to be protected. But everything, beauty in general, is something that the world really needs right now. And I think if we can share that beauty with people and help people realize that the world still is a beautiful place, that's a real powerful thing that we can do as photographers in this
Yeah.
day and age. Everyone needs beauty in their lives, and that's something that we can do, and that's something that gives me meaning to what I do as well. So
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely, mate.
I guess
Absolutely.
that's it for me. If you've
Mate,
been
awesome.
able to stay online for all of that, then thanks so much. I really
We've got
appreciate that.
yeah, mate. We got plenty of people still online, mate. And thank you so much. And I think that there's a really deep tradition with Tasmania, in particular, a history of photographers that are really passionate about the wilderness and passionate about the landscape, and willing and wanting to record that and stand up for it and showcase it. And mate, I think Tasmania is lucky to have you there carrying on that history and that tradition, mate.
Oh, thanks so much, Adam. And the
Oh,
really
absolutely.
interesting thing to that is that a lot of the photographers in Tasmania aren't actually originally from Tasmania. Even Peter Dombrovskis,
Yes.
and Olegas Trakanis, who are both sort of seminal figures in the Tasmanian
Yeah.
wilderness photography scene, weren't originally from Tasmania. And so I think people fall in love with the place and gravitate towards it, and it becomes part of them. And so and it certainly happened to me. So watch out if you come to Tassie. You never know what might happen.
So,
But it's definitely once you have that connection with nature, and you feel that, and you realize that it's so accessible once you've got those skills up, it's really hard for it to leave you. Yeah.
yeah, incredible. I'm going to jump over here. If you have any questions, put them in again, even if you're doubling up the questions, because I'll take them from the bottom, the most recent ones. I'll have a look here. There was a few.
I'll stop sharing screen as well. So
Yeah, do that. We might jump back if there's a specific image question. Let me just scroll back. Oh, here's one here. Freelancer asks, Luke, how do you manage your battery power in the cold? How do you go about that?
oh, that's a very good question. I don't feel that I lose a lot of battery capacity in the cold. Whether it's the Sony batteries that I use, I don't treat them super specially. I guess I do try and keep them in my jacket pocket where I can, but
Hmm.
there's a lot to think about. So quite often, how you're storing your batteries becomes a lesser thought.
Sure.
And I don't notice a huge impact personally on battery life. So I make sure I always recharge them all the time. I have a big battery block, which I've got here, which has my light in it. If you can see that.
Oh yeah, yep,
So
yep.
that's 20,000 milliamp hours. So it basically keeps all of my gear going for the whole time. Those sort of tools are more important, I think, to be able to top up the batteries if they do get depleted, than
Yeah.
necessarily trying to keep them warm all the time, within reason, I suppose. Yeah, if that answers the question.
How do
Yeah.
you plug into that thing? Is it just a USB connection into a normal battery charger, Luke, or?
Yeah, this has just got a oh, now you won't be able to see it at all
No, we
because
can see.
the
We can see.
light's not on. But yeah, it's just got two USB connections. It's also got it's got a USB Type C as well, actually, so I can plug that straight into my camera.
Okay.
With the Sony cameras, you can just plug them straight
Oh,
into the side,
yeah.
and they'll actually charge directly. I think the newer Z series of Nikons do that too. A lot of the mirrorless cameras basically will allow you to do that, and that's really great in the field top-ups of your battery. And it also means that if you want to shoot for hours and hours and hours, you can actually plug that external battery into your camera and just keep it running, and don't have to worry about battery power at all.
Oh, nice.
So that's really good for star trails.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick question, another question here from Steve Traylor. Do you use filters? Are you using filters when you're shooting?
Yeah, I'm using filters less and less, although I definitely use filters, and I'm actually a Nissi ambassador. I have a set of pretty much everything. I use natural night filters sometimes if I'm dealing with cityscapes. I'll use my favorite grad filter is the medium grads, the 3-stop medium. Is probably a bit better than the soft. I think that the Nissi soft grads are a little bit, maybe not too soft, but they're just not as have a strong enough line that I'm looking for. And then I use like 3, 6, 10-stop, 15-stop filters. I've got all of those. I use them in screw-on. If I go on a hike, I'll probably take screw-on filters rather than the big flat filters, just because they weigh so much.
Yep.
And the screw-on filters are actually quite inexpensive if you buy them in a kit. And they're quite light and very compact, so I'll take those out. Obviously, you don't have a grad filter with screw-ons. I wouldn't recommend the grad screw-on filters, even though you can buy them, because you can just do exposure blending and have quite a bit of control over that anyway. So that's what I'll do when I'm on a hike. I won't bother with the big flat filters or anything like that for that one. But that's my preference in other cases.
Yeah.
But filters are pretty important. I use polarizers too. And certainly I'm annoyed if I forget them or don't have them with me if the conditions allow. I like to smooth out the water using them and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. I noticed you in a couple of shots you're using torches and this and that. Is there a particular torch you like using for the different coloured lighting up this or that, or pointing up at the stars, or lighting a scene?
I have a Sunway Photo light, which I was trying to find before, so I had a bit of better light on my face for this feed. I don't know where it is, but it's a Sunway Photo video light. If you go to sunwayphoto.com, you'll be able to find one on there. And the thing that's really cool about them is you can actually adjust the white balance, and so you can actually adjust the white balance to match the sort of like the white balance you're shooting at. And so,
cool.
Because what can happen with lights is that if you're shooting at one white balance and the light's at a different white balance, it kind of looks really fake because the light in the scene doesn't match the rest of the scene.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good light to get, and you can also adjust the brightness on it as well. So that's the light that I actually use a lot out in the field. And I also have a LED Lenser P20 torch as well, which is quite a useful torch.
That's Sunway light, Luke. Do you have a link of that on your website? Is that something you're selling on your website? Or
I used to sell products. I've sort of gone away from doing that, mainly just to simplify my process. I felt like I was just doing so many different things all the time that I wasn't getting much done in the end. So I have to admit I'm not selling products anymore.
Sure.
But I'm very happy if people wanted to get in touch for any details on products. I work with the distributor, and I'm very happy to help you and them out. So do let me know or look up sunwayphoto.com.au. I believe that's the website, and look for video lights. And the one tip I have too with the video light is that even in very dark conditions, even if you've got the lowest brightness on 5%, it can actually be a little bit too bright sometimes. But what you can actually do is it comes in a soft felt pouch, and you actually just leave the pouch on. Let it shine through the pouch, so that diffuses it, and that actually works super well. So it almost comes with its own little diffuser, which is really cool.
Little softbox pouch, beautiful.
Yeah.
What apps are you using to track the Milky Way, Luke?
I use Photo Pills pretty much exclusively. I've dabbled with Stellarium and a few of the others, but Photo Pills is all you really need. And there's got a heap of other really useful tools in there as well. I used it for ages, not really knowing what I was doing. And then I did all the tutorials. They've got a whole bunch of YouTube tutorials. It works a lot better if you understand a Spanish accent, but they are great tutorials, and they really help you to understand how to use Photo Pills to its full advantage. So I really recommend you do those and get the app and really get used to how to use it, because it's amazing how powerful it is. Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Perfect. Steve's got one quick question. Just what was the brand of your battery bank? What battery bank brand are you using
Oh,
there?
battery pack. Yeah, so the brand of the battery pack that I use is actually Xiaomi, which is a Chinese brand. It's XA oh geez, yeah, XAIOMI or something like that.
Okay,
Xiaomi. So it starts
Xiaomi.
with an X.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a big sort of electronics brand in China,
Okay.
and they do make really good equipment, really good quality equipment. And this battery block you can buy online for about $50. Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 of them actually,
Yep.
and they're just excellent. They're really good, and they'll last me a whole trip for 5 or 6 days. They weigh a bit, about 300 grams, I think, something like that. But if you want to have that amount of power in your pocket, you obviously got to make sure you don't leave them in your luggage. I did that accidentally once and it disappeared because they actually took it out.
Oh.
But they are very they are very good units, and I actually used to sell them as well. But yeah, I really recommend them. So if you look it up on eBay, you'll be able to find one. Just look out for make sure they're genuine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. We're not too many other questions here. We'll give it a couple of minutes and see if any more come through. But what I want to do, I want
Yeah.
to tell everyone at home, have a look in the description below to thank Luke for today. You can jump over and follow him. There's a couple of Instagram pages you got. What are your Instagrams called, Luke? Just a shout out.
Yeah, I've got my main Instagram account, which I have to admit I don't use as much as I should lately, but it's just my last name, Tscharke. So it's at
Yep.
Tscharke, which is it's pronounced Tscharke, but spelled Tscharke. So you can go over there, and I've been meaning to put a lot more on there, but you'll see I've been pretty active in the past.
Yep.
But what I am doing is I've got another account called Beauty of Tasmania, and that's at Beauty of Tasmania, and that is. I'm posting on there every day actually, which is quite hard to do, but
Yeah.
I've got that target, and the idea is just to share the beauty of the place, help people be aware of the world's beauty, and especially Tasmania's beauty. And if that's a job that I can do to help make someone's day brighter, then that's what I'll do. So that's what I've been putting a lot of time. Blog and a few other things, and maybe talk about some of my experiences and
Sure.
about some of these places that as I've talked to you about today. So I'm looking forward to getting some time to get into that as well. So
Beautiful.
that will be beautyoftasmania.com.au. You can actually go there and sign up to get a notification when the website goes live. My good friend Dex has been helping me a lot with the design on those sort of things as well. So yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Oh, excellent, mate. Excellent. And actually, we will mention as well, you've got a YouTube channel and you're doing it like a Zoom
That's
link.
true. Yes, yes. I've
Yeah.
got so my friend Nick Monk and also along with Paul Holan and I are running a series of live Zoom sessions actually, and it's called Talking Landscape Photography. And so that's on. There's a YouTube channel that Adam will be linking in the description, and that is the live feed of what we're talking about on Zoom. So there's also a registration link if you want to actually join in on Zoom. And I guess the benefit of joining in on Zoom is you can actually ask questions. It's a bit more interactive and you can feel a bit more part of it. If you'd rather just sit back and watch, then you can also just watch on YouTube as well. So feel free to subscribe on YouTube, and then you'll get a notification when we go live on there. So that'd be awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, check that out in the description below. He's already done 3 shows. So some great content there already. There's one more.
And next week too, Adam, we're doing we're going to talk about social media and some really good tips on how to schedule posts, what you need to know about getting good engagement and reach, and getting building a bit of a profile on social media. We thought that now's a really good time to be talking about social media, because there's a lot of people have a little bit more time on their hands, and it's something that you really can work on now to really set that foundation up for when things might get a bit more busy.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be tuning in for that one. That's something I need a bit of training in, particularly the Instagram side of things. One last question. There's a couple of people that have been interested in your processing. You probably can't really go into depth too much, but your processing of infrared photography in particular, how you take that from a rather funky looking pink and blue color, or I'm not sure how yours come out, and transfer that to black and white. Any secrets there?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a pretty lengthy process. There's a few tutorials that I did watch, or blog articles that I read about that. There's some really good resources actually. My first conversion was with LifePixel Infrared, and LifePixel have a really good blog where they talk about different strategies and ways you can actually do those conversions. I guess it's also one reason I did move to 850 nanometers, because you do get a more black and white image coming straight out of camera.
Okay.
Well, it's actually like a red and white image, but you convert that to monochrome and it's all good. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend, to look at some of those resources. I have written a blog about infrared myself, which is on my website, luketscharke.com. I don't believe I go into too much detail though on the post-processing side though. So maybe that's something I should look at in the future. Yeah, just have a bit of a play. It's actually really amazing what you can get out of those files. I'd spend hours just sitting there moving sliders and seeing what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, all part of the fun.
Awesome, mate. Well, I think that might be it. Thank you so much. As I said, for everyone at home, have a look in the details. Luke's Instagram, Luke's YouTube is there. His website is luketscharke.com. NoAU.com.
Yep. NoAU, yep.
Beautiful, luketscharke.com. I'll put that in the description once this is wrapped up as well, to make sure that's there for you guys. Luke, thank you so much. I'll let you wrap it up and we'll take it away from there.
All right. Well, thanks so much again, Adam, for the opportunity to come on. And I think any photographer would relish the opportunity to talk about their images for so long. And I really do hope you got something out of it. Yeah, feel free to get in touch if you have any follow-up questions as well, or interested in any of the workshops I've talked about, or any of the other sessions or online. Yeah, thanks again, and see you soon.
Thank you, mate. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday morning. Monday morning, we have another great photographer on. Andrew Campbell is going to take us on a journey into deep space astrophotography and all the goodness that contains. Completely otherworldly. You're going to love it. Join us 10 a.m. Monday morning for that one. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Stay well. And I'll see you then. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
Stick with
thanks
me.
so much, Adam. See you guys.
All right, we'll tune out here.